All right, so it's 4 o'clock and we'll call the meeting to order. Yes, we'll call the meeting. Look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. If it's okay with committee, I wanted to deal with schedule item number 8 because the member of the public isn't here today. So we could just kind of defer that for a future meeting as there's members in the public who are sitting here waiting to see if that item is dispensed of. So it was a delegation request and the delegate isn't here today. So
I'm going to defer it for our next meeting.
for a future meeting, yes. So I'll just get that up on the screen. A motion to defer.
Mr. Chair, let me understand. What we're doing is you're deferring it, or you are saying that we're approving that delegation to come at the next meeting? Which one?
So he was previously already approved delegation request, so we're deferring it because we haven't heard back from him as to what his next steps or intent is. So we're just deferring it for a future date.
Okay.
So it's been moved and seconded. Any further speakers? And we'll call the question.
Yes.
And Councillor Usher is voting manually. Yay.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0 with Councillor Usher voting manually, yes.
All right, so if members of the public can head out, I guess, and save some money at the meter. So we'll go to schedule consent items, look for any items to be pulled. Councillor Squire, number 5. Any others? All right, so we'll get a motion to move the remainder, and with the exception of item number 5.
I'm sorry.
Councillor Usher?
Yeah. In addition to 5, I think I have a question on 4. I have to look at it, but I have it marked, so.
Do you want it pulled, or did you just want to speak to it?
Let's pull it, please.
Okay, so 5 and 4?
Yeah.
Any others? All right, we'll get a motion up on the screen.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Item number 4. Councillor Usher, do you need a moment? Or I can go to Squire if you want.
Okay. Now. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I just had one question, but I just found it now. I don't even know why it's coming to us, but who will this person report to?
Through the chair, the Manager of Employment and Income Support Services, will also be the Ontario Works Administrator, reports directly to me. So
is it normal that somebody who is reporting to you that it would have to come to us? Because normally we don't get this position.
Through the chair, it's a legislative position. It's required under the Ontario Works Act. That's why we're asking for your support and approval. Thank you.
Perfect. I'm glad I asked the question. Is the person here?
Through the chair, I believe he is. He's sitting behind us to the right up there. You'll get a chance to meet him. I think you may have already met him.
Well, thank you. Welcome.
Any other further discussion? It's been moved by Councillor Usher. Look for a seconder on the screen. First come, first serve. Moved, seconded, and we'll call the question. And we're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Councillor Squire?
Thank you. Happy Movember, Mr. Chair. I was away last week, so I'm working on it, let me tell you. I wanted to speak to item number 5. It was interesting to read that report. In my prior life, I was a school board trustee, and one of the things that happened at that point in time when I was there, just before I was there was a consolidation of a number of school boards into smaller entities, or larger entities, and a fewer number of school boards. The belief was at that time that it would be a money saver. Having fewer school boards would save money. And in fact, a lot of reports were done, at least while I was there, and economists were hired. And in fact, they found out that wasn't true. It was counterintuitive. In other words, the fact that you created larger entities created even larger bureaucracy, more encumbrances, and in fact, there was an increased cost. So I think it would be useful, or someone in moving forward should see if they can find some of those reports that were done. They were also done in the 1990s when the then Harris government consolidated a lot of different municipalities. So I think we have to be really careful in just following what may be intuitive, which is, oh, if we just create less public health units, it's going to save us money. In fact, we found with school boards at least, and with municipalities, that wasn't the case. And it actually cost more money to operate. So I just wanted to say that at this point, without prejudging the matter, just to make it clear that it would be useful to look at some of that material. I don't know if Dr. Mackey's looked at it or anyone else has looked at it yet. Maybe staff could indicate if they have.
I do see Dr. Mackey here. Did you want to hear from him, Councillor?
Like to speak.
Dr. Mackey, sorry to put you on the spot, but that's why you're the doctor.
Not at all. Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair, first of all, let me say it's been a pleasure getting to know your excellent staff, Rosanna Wilcox and Adam Thompson, as we work through this expert panel feedback process over the last few months. The issue of costs has been examined at a fairly high level. This is what I would call the nuclear response to what are some really specific problems within specific areas in public health. There are some areas where there are some issues with critical mass in some of the smaller health units. And then there's some places where the governance management relationship hasn't worked out for various reasons. But there are also a lot of health units where things are working fairly well. And this proposal essentially dissolves all health units, the good and the bad, which we feel would be a loss. The cost issue in particular, it's almost certain that costs would increase here with the harmonization of contracts, with the increased complexity of the management roles, and with adding essentially an additional level of oversight to public health at the LHIN level rather than at the local level. Public health has always been a local enterprise. When public health first initiated, it was boards of health in local communities that were identifying issues that had to be addressed locally, and particularly the cholera outbreaks in the mid-19th century. And, various boards and other agencies, CUPE, for example, recently released a position all identifying that the local contact and the relationship with the municipalities is a crucial part to doing public health work.
It sounds to me as if this is being considered, and I would tend to agree that the cost you will find will go up when you do things like this. So I thank you for that. I'm glad it's being considered, and I look forward to hearing from you again on this issue.
Any further speakers? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Reynolds.
Yeah, it just seemed to me something I'm not sure if I encountered in the report, but by going with a larger LHIN, I don't think a community like London, our diversity wouldn't be reflected as well in a larger organization.
Councillor Armstrong.
Yes, through you to the presenter. I'm just wondering, obviously there's, the government feels there's pros and obviously others feel there's cons. Can you help me understand, why do you think the government's, wanting to move ahead with this? Obviously there's the reasons we've been given here, but is there a political motivation? Are we trying to set up a bigger organization? Because obviously a different organization will mean a lot of the people that are currently there, there'll be changes, there'll be new people, new opportunities for new people. So do you think that that's maybe the reason why this is being proposed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can't speculate per se on what the political aspects of this may be. There certainly are administrative challenges from a ministry perspective that would be addressed here. The ministry has said in the past that they, have trouble managing the 36 different health units as 36 different stakeholders. And in particular, I think that relationship with medical officers of health who are generally independent-minded and want to work for the needs of their communities in spite of what a provincial agenda might be, I think that can be challenging from the bureaucratic perspective as well. It should be noted that the government has not made a commitment on these recommendations yet. It is a panel of experts that the minister has convened, but the minister hasn't indicated what the response would be. I certainly, just to back up, there are important issues in some health units that need to be addressed. And in fact, there was a 2006 report called the Capacity Review Committee that looked at public health after, SARS and Walkerton, all these major public health crises, and made some recommendations. And the 2006 Capacity Review Committee recommendations would essentially solve many of the problems that have been identified, but wouldn't cause any of the breakdown in that local relationship that we're most worried about here.
I guess the thing is, I did have a look at the panel that was put together. Would you in your, I don't know these people. Are many of these people, obviously, it's a panel put together to look at the issue, whether there should be change or no change. Obviously, they're recommending change. Do you think anything has to do, this recommendation has to do with, when they looked at these different organizations, 23, I think. Do you feel that they were looking at the issue of overall that there might be some wastage, money not being well spent, and that's why they felt that, there needs to be an adjustment there? I'm not saying that that's the only reason, but are some of the health units perhaps not run as well as what they could be? I guess that would be a fair question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there have been over the last, say, 2 decades, there have been 3 health units with significant breakdowns. The first was in Muskoka Parry Sound, where the Board of Health, which was, it was local representatives, but a whole number of municipalities, was interested only in reducing the tax levy and not in achieving public health goals. And so that Board of Health was eventually dissolved and moved into Simcoe Muskoka, and then the rest went to, sorry, I don't know my geography as well as I should, but to another health unit. So, so that issue was addressed that time. There was also more recently a major breakdown in governance in Algoma, where it was the reverse problem, where the medical officer of health was moving things forward that had sometimes clear conflicts of interest, and the board was rubber stamping and not providing the oversight that is needed in that situation. And that board was dissolved, although they haven't changed the geography. They haven't amalgamated with anyone else at this point. There's also other places where it has been alleged that that the municipalities have been using public health funds to fund non-public health work. So they might have an HR, IT, finance department that serve the whole municipality, but are paid entirely out of public health funds. So that's certainly an issue from an accountability of public funds. But beyond that, there are literally dozens of health units that have done some very innovative things over that time period. You know, I would argue that out of 36 health units, having that small number of breakdown over that long period is actually a pretty good track record. And I hope that the baby isn't thrown out with the bathwater. Thanks.
Is that it, Councillor?
Well, I hope the same thing. I hope that that doesn't happen. And obviously, anyway, those were questions, so I'll wait for discussion.
Councillor Usher, Councillor Van Hulst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to be long. I just want to make sure that we thank the staff, Rosanna, Wilcox and Adam Thompson for putting this together, and as well as Dr. Mackley for being behind them with this information. The staff, obviously, the people who created this report went according to their mandate. Most of them seem to be healthcare workers. When I say healthcare, medical officers of health, except for one politician, my good friend Gary McNamara is there. So I thought that I would have known better than him to do something like this. Just kidding, he's my friend, so I have to be careful how I talk about him. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to move this.
So it's moved by Councillor Usher. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, my comment is this doesn't seem unlike the Ontario Energy Board hoping to consolidate hydro utilities. So to reduce that kind of bureaucracy. But what's interesting is we're noticing that there's another way to save costs, and that's through service sharing agreements. London Hydro is very well resourced, and we're able to actually offer our resources to some of the smaller utilities. So they're able to function independently, but provide higher quality services. So I have a question through you to our guest, Dr. Mackey. Do you see any opportunity for centers like London Middlesex Health Unit to offer some guidance service, something along those lines to the smaller health units, which might be an alternative to what's being suggested by the province?
Through you, Mr. Chair, thanks for the question. A similar question came up at our Board of Health meeting. And, you know, there are some examples where Middlesex London Health Unit is already doing things like that. There are joint purchasing agreements. Our health unit negotiated on behalf of the whole province, all 36 health units recently, on a purchase agreement for birth control pills, for example. And there are other situations where the partnership is, let me just say, less formal. So we put out great materials educating people around X or Y health problem, and our neighbors rebrand them and use them in their health units, which, you know, we're of course very supportive of, and we share resources back and forth as well. There are also specific collaboration initiatives where the Central West, so that would be large region, about a dozen health units, including Middlesex London for the purposes of this. Their communications officers get together when they are planning large campaigns, influenza season, for example, which is, is upon us. I hope all of you've got your flu shots. But this sort of sharing between health units, we all have a very common objective, and that is to improve the health of our populations, and there's a lot of collaboration that does happen. Could there be more? I certainly think there could be, and it's something that we continue to explore. Thanks.
Any other speakers? All right. Oh, Mr. Mayor.
Just getting here a little late. I see it's been moved and seconded. We're into debate now, not questions? Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Chair. I just want to say really briefly that this is, of course, a decision of monumental proportions, and one that could have, as Councillor Squire pointed out, significant impacts from a cost perspective and from a complication of management perspective. So I support this direction wholeheartedly. I think that the province needs to have much more consultation with stakeholders, with communities, and we need to get a good sense of what the costs are to moving in a direction like this, and what the potential benefits are. But I do fear any kind of unintended consequence to trying to drive efficiency by amalgamating.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong, you had a question, sir?
Sorry, I was just asking questions earlier. Because I just walked in the middle of things, so I did want to make some comments.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess the thing is I'm always leery. I mean, the government's record on health generally has, in my mind, not been a great record. I mean, some of the programs they implemented, like the records issue, dragged on, has continued to drag on for many, many years, costing millions and millions of dollars. And again, I'm just leery that this is not well thought out. You know, I always looked at our health unit as a local health unit, which this council has members on, and, you know, we have an opportunity to, and there's been issues in the past where this council wanted to know about certain issues, and our health unit has come forward and answered those questions and told us their strategy. So there's been that local connection. I don't see this new system that they may want to implement as a local connection, but rather a bigger regional connection. And I think it's important that there's that contact between local councils and their health units. And so I don't think this is a good idea. I'm not sure really what the motivation is. I just know that when you implement something like this, it's a massive change, can take a long time. Whether or not what the costs will be and the fallout, I'm not really sure. But I would just think that, you know, obviously we may end up in the end losing years and years of experience, and that there will be new people in place that maybe don't have the same experience as the people will say at the helm right now, and that could have some consequences. So there's probably a long list of reasons as to why I don't support this, but I think I've made my point.
Any further speakers? Councillor Cassidy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to point out for the committee's knowledge that a lot of the recommendations, especially around accountability and improvements to governance and management, a lot of the points that they make are things that are already happening at the local health unit at Middlesex London. It's a very well-run organization, and it's a very strong board that is highly engaged. And I just want to point out as well, going to this larger model for many of the reasons people have articulated is not necessarily a good thing, but we have to look as well at the ability of our local health unit and the local board to respond with flexibility when things erupt, like crises arise, like the opioids crisis and the injection drug crisis here in London. These are specific to London and may not necessarily impact other smaller regional health units. And so I fear the greater risk in going this way will have an impact on the smaller health units, because they'll be dragged along in London's wake. We're a big ship, and some of the things that happen in London aren't necessarily having an impact in the smaller regions. And so I fear they will have a real loss of that sort of local flavor of delivering public health care. So I think that's something we also have to keep in mind. So I also want to thank staff and Dr. Mackey for the response. I know the health unit has a response as well, and I know there's a response to this from AMO and other groups across the province. So it seems to be pretty unanimous that the stakeholders in this situation are not on board with where the province, or where the expert panel is recommending that the province go.
Any other speakers? All right, it's been moved and seconded. We'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
All right, and we have a delegation from the DIAC, some number 9. So I'm not sure if you wanted to come downstairs, or are you okay up there? It's complete. Okay, yep, no problem. It's all yours.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Florence Cassar, and I'm the chair of the Awards and Committee on behalf of the DIAC Committee. And my purpose today is to seek your support for the 4 nominees for the annual Diversity and Race Relations Inclusivity Award. In your package, I believe it starts on page 115, you will see the 4 nominations that the committee is recommending. These nominees were reviewed by the subcommittee and met the city procedures and bylaws as they were outlined. And there are 5 actually awards our categories within the awards, and we are recommending the PH Spa and Salon for the Small Business Award, which is under 49 members. There were no nominations for the large organizations this year. And then moving into the Social and Community Services, non-for-profit, greater than 50 members, LUSO. The Community and Social Services for under 49 would be Sanctuary London, and then youth groups would be Hoops for Hope. I can quickly go through our rationale for these recommendations if you would like, beginning with PH Spa and Salon. Would you like me to proceed on that front?
No, I mean, it's okay.
Okay,
Just looks at the
thank
committee
you.
if they have any questions. Councillor Usher?
Well, thank you very much for the presentation, both for the report as well as the nomination. I'm glad to see that you got those out by now. Do you have a date for when you will be presenting these awards through you, Mr. Chair?
Yes, it will be December 12th council meeting
Okay,
with a reception to follow.
okay.
That we hope you will all be able to join us.
Well, that's the reason I asked, because in the past, we don't get an invitation individually, and it would be nice to get an invitation so that we could pop in and say hello, because you generally do it over there, and I never know about this.
Okay.
I'm the one who started this award way back in
Yes.
1998.
I'll follow up.
Still, I never know about it. I come to the council meeting, and the next thing I know that there are things happening in there. So I'd really like to know about it. I'm not criticizing, I'm just,
No,
I'm just begging
absolutely,
for an
and
invitation.
we
if
would
I
like
may.
you to be there. So I will follow up with the city secretary. It's our understanding it's in your calendar, but evidently not. So I'll follow up right after this meeting.
Okay, thank you. I'll be happy to move the report and the entire report. Oh, okay, it's moved already, that's okay.
Councillor Armstrong?
Yes, I'd like to thank the group for vetting the nominees and for the work they've done on this. And of course, that is correct. Councillor Usher has quite the history here. And so congratulations for him for the work he's done in the past.
Any other speakers? So it's been moved and seconded, and we'll call the question. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
And of course, I just wanted to add, thank you, Cash, for also joining her as well. Not sure if you heard me.
Cash.
Thank you, Cash. All right, so items for direction, number 6. Sorry, number 10. I looked at the 6th report, sorry, my apologies. So, if any speakers? All right, get that up on this, sorry, Councillor Armstrong?
I'll just move it.
Okay, moved. Get up on the screen. Moved already, look for a seconder.
Can't find my arrow.
Moved by Councillor, second by Councillor Usher, and we're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Items for direction, number 11. Any speakers? And we're voting. Sorry, we'll call the question, sorry. Look for a mover and seconder, of course.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Deferred matters list. Any speakers? Seeing none, we'll look for a mover and seconder on the screen. And he's voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
And Councillor Usher, if you could just chair number 13. If you could just take the chair, because I'm going to move a motion. It's a councillor submission.
Okay.
I'm the councillor who moved it.
Okay, I'm chairing, Councillor Sally.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. So I think members had the opportunity to see the letter here. I know Mayor Brown is here as well, and he's indicated and still consistent as a seconder on this motion. I think this is a positive step in the right direction. I'm happy to answer any questions that committee members may have. I think if you remember, some of the previous meetings have been held at the police headquarters meeting. I can recall one in particular around carding, and having talked to members of the community before and after the meeting and their experiences, and they had raised at that time quite a number of concerns with how the meeting was hosted at that facility and how they felt as if there was some barriers to it. Members were actually turned away at that time because of lack of space. And I think it's important to recognize that some members of the community, whether they're racialized members of the community who feel as if there's some added barriers, whether it's vulnerable women or people who have experiences that may not always be the experiences that we share with policing, by us extending an invitation to the police board by saying for you guys to have future meetings at the City of London, I think is appropriate at the City Hall versus at the police headquarters, where then we're essentially compelling members of the public to go and have conversations at the police headquarters, which sometimes can be challenging and difficult conversations. I myself have had to go and speak at the police headquarters, and even for me as an individual and as a counselor with the privilege that I have, it's still somewhat of a barrier and somewhat of an intimidating experience. So I think by us extending this invitation and saying to the Police Service Board that you're welcome to host your meetings here is a positive step in the right direction and a positive step in really community building. And hopefully we'll have unanimous support today. So back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong. Anyone else?
Well, I certainly don't think this is a bad idea, maybe a good idea. I guess the thing is, you know, we're initiating a invitation, and so I don't know how it will be received at the Police Services Board. And so I'm just wondering, has there been any communications or discussions prior to this being brought forward with perhaps the police chief or at the board to sort of give them a heads up and ask them how they might feel about this? Because they could have certainly turned around and asked us if they could do this, utilize City Hall, but we're going the other way. So now if they don't, for whatever reasons, and they may have some reasons, and look at things differently, they're sort of on the spot, because we've said that, you know, all the benefits, but are there any drawbacks? And here's the first example. Would the Police Services Board require, would there be any additional costs? Would there have to be added security because of this building and that sort of thing? I don't know any of that. And I'm wondering if there's been any inquiries about that. Would they expect additional security or costs? And perhaps through you, Mr. Chair, the mover and the seconder, maybe they have some information whether it would be cost neutral, or would there have to be security here different than what we have now, which is basically very little security other than the commissionaire. So if you have information on those issues, I wouldn't mind hearing that now.
Councillor Sally or the Mayor, do you have any information on this?
Sure, I'll try to answer, and if the mayor wants to add to it, because he has a little bit more experience with the Police Service Board. As you noticed in the letter, one of my last paragraphs, it's for the city perspective, it should be cost neutral when speaking to the clerk's office. I think of, you know, I haven't seen any enhanced police presence when I've been to meetings. I think everyone who from their staff is already a police officer, so I'm not sure what additional security concerns or risk that there may be. None have been brought to my attention at this time. I can't speak for the police service, but this is the Police Service Board, not the police. So I think there's a huge distinction. I'm not asking the police chief and their operations to move into this building. I'm asking that the police board meetings, which are the public oversight, come to the People's House here in City Hall, where, you know, so some members have in the public, including myself, have expressed that this is a little bit more of an inviting place. This place in itself still, as we've heard from members of the community when they've come here for public participation meetings, has been sometimes a barrier, whether it's because the podium or whether they're speaking from up there. But I just feel as if this place provides an opportunity in place where the police, board can showcase the work that they do to the greater community, as well as members of the public can have a time and opportunity to engage. So I hope I answered the councillor's questions, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Armstrong?
Well, I guess the thing is, we'll find out, obviously, the invitations being, going to be sent, and I'm going to support that. But again, I guess we'll find out if there are any additional costs or how much is involved in organizing this. So I certainly support it. Obviously, there's obviously more room here, and maybe there'll be more public participation in the sense that people will come in and listen to the meetings more so than there, and I can see that as a benefit. But again, I don't know. I have little, understanding of what the requirements are. What the requirements are of the police and the police board as far as security. So that'll be interesting to see if that becomes an issue, if it's cost neutral. So I think we can, anyways, doesn't hurt to look at things and see how people feel.
Mayor Brown?
Thank you very much. I wholeheartedly support this, and Councillor Salee called me and shared his idea with me, asked if I'd support it, and I said yes right away. I do want to say at the outset that I did learn some information today that I want to share with committee. I made a commitment to share with the committee. I heard from the Police Service Board Chair, and she has indicated to me that she's had conversations with police administration, and they now have a room that could be available to the board that has access to YouTube, and so it could be broadcast. But I think that's just one piece of information. And I don't speak for the board. I represent the community in my role as mayor, and I don't think it's simply about the ability to broadcast. I think it's much more complicated than that, and it's a greater issue. This has been done before. The Hamilton Police Service Board meets in their city hall and in council chambers, and I think that that's appropriate. This is the seat of our local government. This is a $100 million operation that there's great public interest in, and I think that transparency can certainly be being able to broadcast on YouTube, but it can be much more than that as well. And this is an environment that's very conducive to that. And I think it's beyond transparency. I think it's also about accessibility. And when we talk about accessibility, we sometimes think about mobility, and that's certainly part of it. This is a very accessible site, but also to make sure that all members of the community feel welcome, and I have heard from a number of members of our community that there's an intimidation factor entering into that space. Some people even express surprise that these are public meetings and that they can attend. And that makes sense on a lot of levels. It's behind a locked door. You have to, essentially it's a building within a building, and you have to go through a locked door in order to get to the boardroom. And so I think that's another important piece of information that we should consider. This is simply an invitation. It's an invitation that should have passed through committee and to council. The board can debate. The board, I'm sure, will discuss the issues that have been raised by Councillor Armstrong and others about cost and whether there's security needs, those sorts of things. That board, like all other boards, has a budget, and they can make decisions but where that's allocated if there are costs. But at the end of the day, it's a board decision. This is an invitation to use Councillor Salee's term, the people's space, the seat of government, and they can say yes or no to that. And so I'm very happy to support this. I think that it's on the right track, and I thank Councillor Salee for bringing it forward.
Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. And I want to thank Councillor Salee for bringing this forward as well. It's really interesting because just a week earlier, I had a conversation with a member of the Police Services Board, and we were talking about the meetings and how they could be improved in all of the ways that Councillor Salee outlines in his letter. It was a nice coincidence then to see this letter appear on the agenda. I'm glad the councillor and the mayor both pointed out that this London Police Services and the London Police Services Board are two separate entities, and the chief is not a member of the board. So it's a civilian board. It's an arm's length board. It's an oversight body. And so I believe having the meetings separate from police headquarters in more or less neutral territory is a really good symbol to the public about the openness of these meetings, about about extending an invitation to the public to come to these meetings. There are a number of people who have had negative interactions with police who don't feel comfortable going to police headquarters. It is a very imposing building, and you do have to check in. You can't just walk freely into a public gallery like this to participate in a meeting. The fact that the meeting about carding was one where people were turned away, that speaks volumes. That's precisely the kind of meeting where the public are affected by the actions of police, and it's for the Police Services Board to examine those actions and invite the public to tell their stories and participate in that way. This is nothing to do with the London Police Services, and that's why I want to make sure we make that distinction. The London police officers are a very professional group of people. They do their job here in London to keep the citizens safe. They do their job under extreme pressure and stress, and I can't say enough about what a great organization they are. But this is a civilian board that is at arm's length from the police services, and they should be holding their meetings in a place where everybody feels welcome. And it does go much beyond live streaming and putting these meetings on YouTube. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for doing this.
Councillor Squire.
Yes, you'll know, Councillor Slee will know that this pains me in the extreme, but I have to say this is one of the best ideas that I think has come forward since I've been here. It's a simple idea. It's just so simple, and I'm kind of jealous that I didn't come up with it. But congratulations. I think it's an offer, and I think it's going to do one of two things. It's going to bring the meetings here, or it's going to make the meetings there more accessible and more open to the public. And as a councillor, I don't have time in my schedule to go to police board meetings, and I can watch them on YouTube and get a feel for some of the issues that are happening. So I think it's really positive. I don't see the downside of extending the offer, and if there's concerns or things that have to be managed with regard to it, we can get past that. And I'm really hoping that Councillor Slee will have another good idea during this term.
Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you very much, Mr. Presiding Officer, and through you, I'm very much in support of this too. The London Police Service has been doing some wonderful public engagement recently, and it'd be great if the Police Services Board took on a new challenge in that direction too, and I think this could be it. We've invested quite a bit in these resources to make meetings accessible in many ways to our public, and so it's a great idea to extend that invitation. I hope to accept.
I'm going back to the second round with Councillor Armstrong, but Councillor, Mr. Mayor, would you just remind us when they meet? They meet on a regular basis.
Thank you very much. The third Thursday of every month. It's a daytime meeting. The closed session meeting begins at 10 a.m. And then runs through until a lunch break that occurs around 12. Sometimes it goes a little bit longer, and then the public meeting begins at 1 p.m. It usually wraps up around 3 or 3:30.
Councillor Armstrong.
No, I'm good. I'm ready to vote.
Okay. Anyone else wish to speak? Anyone else? Okay, I will just say something from the chair. At the beginning, I was not in support of this. I didn't quite understand what the repercussion, but a few things have been brought to my attention here. For example, that it's a civilian board and the timing, because I was concerned about conflict of timing. I really don't want anyone to come in here and take this away from us with our standing committee meetings, but Thursdays during the day doesn't seem to be a problem from what I know. Perhaps there might be others. The other thing, though, is that I want to make sure that this is an offer. I don't think we should force it on the board. I think the board should decide it on themselves, but as an invitation, I think it's worth the while to offer it to them and let them decide. So long as that's the way we are going. So Councillor Sally, I'll let you wrap up and then we'll call for the vote.
Thank you, and thank you for the kind words all, and thanks for the support. And again, I think this is a positive step in the right direction and look forward to, hopefully, I'm still not appointed on the Police Service Board. Sorry, I'm appointed by you guys, but I'm not, haven't been sworn in yet, so we'll see how that goes. But if not, I'm hoping, if this does come up, I'm sure the mayor will probably speak to it. So, thanks.
Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. Let's vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
I return the chair back to Councillor Sally.
Thank you. Great job, Councillor Usher. So now the only thing remaining left is a confidential matter. You'll notice C1 to C5. I don't believe it should take us too long, but look for a motion moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by, sorry. So it's on the screen, yeah? Just for members of the public, I don't think we'll be coming back, so we'll just probably, we'll adjourn from in camera. We'll open the door, so if anyone wants to find us, you'll find us out in the hallway. So, and we're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Committee room number 3.